Hi guys, today's tutorial is a very quick and easy one. I'll be showing you how you can make your own drawstring bag in only 5 minutes. So you want to grab your tape measure and measure down 1.5 inches from the top of your square and then 2 inches, and you just want to repeat that marking on both sides of the squares that you have here. That gap is going to be really important because you're going to be using it to add in your drawstring later. So once we've done that, we're going to stitch around our square around these corners here, and you want to make sure that you leave that 1/2 inch gap unsewn. So you just want to do a regular straight stitch to stitch all the way around. Granted, you can use a needle and thread if you don't have a sewing machine, so you can do this in one of two ways. You can stitch down to that first line that we've made and stop stitching there. Make sure that you do a reverse stitch to lock it in, and then you can go back and leave that 1/2 inch gap and then stitch down again and then continue sewing around the bag. Or you could simply stitch around the whole of the bag and then just seam rip that 1/2 inch gap. Again, we're leaving that gap so we can use it to add in our drawstring later. So yeah, I'm just sewing around the bag and sewing around the corners. If you do want a tutorial on how to sew corners, then make sure you check out the video in the cards. Next, I'm going to clip the bottom corners of our bag, and that's just going to help the bag maintain its kind of square shape when we do flip it inside out. Now we want to take one of the bags and flip it inside out, and then we're going to insert that inside the bag that is wrong side out, as you can see. Then we're going to stitch around the top, but we want to leave about 1 inch unsewn, and that's going to make sure that we can flip our bag right side out when we're finished. Once you've stitched around the top, we're going to find that small gap that we left unsewn, and we're going to stick our fingers in as much as possible and try to flip this bag right side out. Once you have, it might be worth pressing it just to make all of the seams flat before we move on to this next step. Now I'm going to take my tape measure and I'm just measuring to check from the top down to what that little gap that we left open initially. For me, that is 3/4 of an inch, so I'm going to take that to my sewing machine, as you can see. I'm just going to stitch around the entirety of the top of the bag, again using that 3/4 of an inch seam allowance. So to make that casing that we're going to use to add in our drawstring, we need to add another stitch at the bottom of where that gap starts. I'm just finding where that is, and that for me is 1/2 inch down from that initial stitch that we just made. So you can do this on your sewing machine by either marking with a ruler or chalk the length of that, or drawing a straight line so it's straight, or you can go to your sewing machine and use the seam allowance guide instead, so that you're making sure that your stitch is going to be parallel to that first stitch. If you've gotten to this point, it means that we are halfway done. Now what I want to do is add the drawstring to this as well. So you can either use ribbon or you can use fabric. I'm using fabric and I've just cut about 1 inch strips. You can make them as long as you want to, but I'm just going to stitch down using about 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way down these strips, and then I'm going to turn it inside out. Having a loop turner for this will literally make your life 10 times easier, because all you have to do is insert your loop turner all the way up, pinch a bit of your fabric and pull it back through. And I know I say that like it's really simple, but you do want to take your time with this, because if you snag or snap the fabric halfway through, it makes it a tiny bit more painful. But if you don't have a loop turner, you can feel free to use a safety pin or a hairpin. There's actually so many different hacks on how to turn straps inside out, and if you want to go the easy route, you can use ribbon instead. So after you make your skinny little strip and you've turned it inside out, you can press it if you want it to be really flat. You can either use this as it is to add into your drawstring bag and just have one really long strip, or you can cut the straps in half like I did. Just make sure you stitch the end so that it doesn't fray. For the final step, I'm just going to insert my strings across or into that small casing. To do that, I'm putting a safety pin around the end of the strap, and I'm just going to insert that through the hole and keep pushing it through until it pops out the other side. So it's almost like I'm threading it through. Just take your time while you're doing this so that the safety pin doesn't unhook, because that will be a very painful process. So I'm just doing it for one side, and then I'm going to do it again for the other side. So here is the final look. Let me know what you guys think. I think this came out really cute. But if you do want to see more easy beginner sewing tutorials, then make sure you check out this video next.